everybody, welcome back to my channel. It's been a while. How are you? Hope you're doing well. In today's video, we are going to be discussing the differences between the Pretty Little Liars show and the books. I find it really interesting how the show didn't take some of the routes that the characters in the books did. Especially Aria. Aria's one that's really, really interesting just because of the whole Ezra thing. But we will get into that. If you didn't obviously know, Pretty Little Liars is based off a book series by Sarah Shepard. The show is adapted to the books. It follows some aspects of the books, but a lot of it does change from the books. I've not actually read all of the books. I know what happens, but I'm only a few books in. Yeah, I've been reading them and I think it's really interesting the different characteristics of the characters, but also what they actually look like, because I found it really hard. The characters look different to what they are in the TV show, but I found it really hard to separate that because I grew up on Pretty Little Liars, the TV show, not the books. So I found it really difficult to differentiate between having to view the characters as different. I think we should just get started. I've printed out what the characters look like, so you can just get a better insight into the characters from the books.
Hi guys, sorry, I'm just editing. I just needed to clear up. This is not a timeline of the books, so I don't go into too much detail about their time during the books. It's very short to the point. So if you would like me to do a full timeline of the Pretty Little Liars books, I will. So make sure to let me know if you would like that. But yeah, this is not a timeline. It's just character differences, things like that, and some of their experiences on the show compared to the books. Okay, that's it. Bye-bye.
Alison is the only one that doesn't have a human picture. All the other characters, the character photo is of an actual human, but Alison, I could only find the doll version of her. So obviously this is what she looks like in the show. We all know her, and then this is her in the books. Very similar, not really much different. So just before we get started, actually, I'm gonna read you the order of the books and what they go in. The list of Pretty Little Liars books. The first book debuted in 2006, and I believe the last one was in 2014. So we have Pretty Little Liars, which is the first book. We have Flawless, which is the second. Perfect, Unbelievable, Wicked, Killer, Heartless, Wanted, Twisted, Ruthless, Stunning, Burned, Crushed, Deadly, Toxic, and Vicious. Those are the books. The books are actually divided into 4 different arcs. In the first arc is the first 4 books, which are Pretty Little Liars, Flawless, Perfect, and Unbelievable. Arc 2 is the next 4 books, which is Wicked, Killer, Heartless, Wanted. Arc 3 is the next 4 books, which are Twisted, Ruthless, Stunning, Burned. And then Arc 4 is the last 4 books, which is Crushed, Deadly, Toxic, and Vicious. I like that, separating it. But the books debuted in 2006, and Sarah Shepard said that it was based on her experiences of growing up in the suburbs. But luckily she said she didn't experience, having a stalker or anything like that. So that is obviously whew. But yeah, after the success of the first book, that's when she developed more into the other books. The book series stayed on the New York's best time seller list for 62 weeks, which is crazy. And then that obviously kind of spawned in the TV show of it. Before we get into Alison, sorry, I've kind of put her up a bit too early, my bad. I can't bother to take her down. I'm going to do some general differences between the show and the books, and then we're going to delve into the characters in general. Obviously in the show, the girls come quite close after the first A message. They all kind of mutter like, have you been getting taxes as well? Like, what's going on? Like, tell me what's going on. And they come quite close quite early on in the show. Obviously we're told that these girls were friends before, but that they had all kind of like grown apart during the year that Alison went missing. However, in the books, they don't actually really become close until book 8 of the series. So there's a long pathway between when you first start reading and when they form the group. I actually quite liked this when I was reading the books, because you get to discover more of the characters' individual lives first, and kind of, them exploring with other character relationships and things like that, but also exploring themselves. And then they come together. So I found that really, actually, I liked it. In the books, Paige, Shauna, Caleb, Mary Drake, Garrett, Sydney, Charles, and Sarah Harvey do not exist. They don't exist in the books. They're not a thing. No, thank you. They don't exist in the books. The one I found most interesting was Caleb not being in the books. In terms of like, we got to see Hannah explore other things, but also not having Caleb there, because obviously in the TV show, I think Caleb is he keeps Hannah kind of grounded. Do you know what I mean? So for Hannah not to really have that properly in the books, I actually found really interesting. But also I found it interesting because Caleb is very much in the show on hand. Like, if something needs hacked, he's on it. Quite liked them having to figure things out without too much help from other people. So I found that really interesting. And obviously the whole Charles De Laurentiis situation does not happen in the books. That's another interesting thing, because the person who is actually A, which we will get onto, that's really interesting because they take a completely different route. Some similarities to what the show tried to do, but not having the Charles De Laurentiis thing in there is a big thing. And then it kind of makes you wonder, like, okay, so why did the show do the Charles De Laurentiis thing if it's not a thing in the books? So I enjoyed a lot seeing like, why did the show do this, but then the books didn't do this, and then whatever, like. That was the thing I found most interesting about what wasn't in there and maybe why it wasn't in there. So I'm going to read some character names, and these are character names that appear in the books. Did my voice just break? So these are characters that appear in the books but don't appear in the TV show. So we have Jordan Hobart, Catherine DeLong, Kelsey Pierce, Amelia Pennythistle, Iris Taylor, Zach Pennythistle, Nick Maxwell, Isaac Colbert, Courtney De Laurentiis, and Tabitha Clark. They're all characters that aren't in the TV show but are in the books. One of the other major plot points, I guess this links more to Aria, so I could have put it in her section, but Ezra doesn't really appear in the books. Ezra has this relationship with Aria, but then he gets caught quite early on, and I think he gets arrested and then like banned from being a teacher, which to me was the most interesting thing of the entire books versus TV show thing, because it made me question, okay, why have they put Ezra in the TV show as such a main character? Why did they openly choose to, the books have ended this inappropriate relationship, but we're going to carry it on, and we're not even going to carry it on for a few more seasons. We're going to carry it on throughout the entire show to the point where they get married. And that bit to me was really interesting, because who chose that and like why? And not even in like a why did you put that in the show type of thing, which I mean, I'm kind of like, okay, that underage relationship was not it, but why was it included like that? I think it's really interesting, just because obviously Ezra in the show, he's like a main character. Like, he's like, one of the main love interests, and we see him from season 1 to season 7. But in the books, he just appears kind of here and there. and then kind of disappears, and Aria has other relationships and other partners that she explores. And I just find it more interesting than anything, because what was the choice there in the writer's room? What was the reason behind, okay, actually, let's keep them? Was it just to explore the dynamic a bit more, or to explore, maybe Ezra was just a really interesting character to them that they wanted to explore even more? Something like that. Or even just kind of like showing that Aria is limited, because throughout the show she only has Ezra really as a relationship. She has other partners, but they don't really stay, because ultimately it all goes back to Ezra. So yeah, I find that really interesting the most about the differences, just because like I think like he's such a key character in the TV show, but in the books he's not. So who decided, you know what, we're gonna keep Ezra, we're gonna keep him? Maybe I have an idea, maybe that like they wanted to keep Ezra around to maybe cause a bit more trouble with Aria, and Aria kind of coming to terms with like who she loves and things like that. But I don't know, in the books Mike and Noel are actually quite main characters, to be honest, but in the TV show they aren't. And maybe this is my gripe, because if you've watched some videos on my channel before, I've kind of said that Noel irritates me because he is always involved in like the main plot points of the show, but he's also just like irrelevant, and he's always there just for plot convenience. And with Mike doesn't annoy me, but Mike is also just kind of there. And he's involved here and there with some storylines, but like not really. So to see Mike and Noel as like actual characters that they're building in the books was really interesting. And I wonder why, like I said, kind of with Ezra in the show, they decided, okay, these two are going to take a step back. Noel was like kind of like, Noel was involved in a lot of things, but like it was mostly just for plot convenience rather than like, let's actually think about it. Do you know what I mean? In the books as well, Melissa gets married to someone called Darren, and her and Darren have a child. Obviously this is different because in the books Melissa and Ian, do they get married? I think they get married. And Melissa falls pregnant with his child, but sadly she has a miscarriage. So that's the difference there. Ren in the books is half Korean and half British, and in the book he's actually named Ren Kim instead of Ren Kingston, who's obviously just like full British in the TV show. And then Jenna and Maya in the books are actually really close friends, but in the TV show obviously they're not. That is also another interesting dynamic, because who decided, okay, in the show they're not going to be friends, and kind of not Emily's enemy, but they don't get along. So that's really interesting. That's an interesting one. Leading on to the Jenna thing, in the books Jenna was just kind of seen as like a dork type of thing. I hate the word dork so much, I'm so sorry. But obviously in the show she's kind of Alison's Alison's enemy. In the books they had a dislike, but it wasn't like an enemy thing compared to what it was in the TV show. In the books Jenna was just like a target for Alison's bullying, much like what Mona was in the show. In the books as well, actually the liars get arrested multiple times because Alison sets them up for a lot of things. In the TV show they get arrested like once or twice, but it wasn't for things that Alison had like purposely set them up for, if you know what I mean. Another interesting character change that they made, which is also really interesting. In the books, Toby is a creep, a real creep, and he becomes close with Emily because they're both swimmers, but he ends up dying quite early on in the books. But obviously in the show, Jenna is the one who's the creep to Toby. So that's another one that I'm like, okay, in the writer's room, who decided that's going to have a little change? And like, why? Because that is a big change, because Toby's a main character in the show. He obviously becomes a police officer. He stays with Spencer for like the majority of the show. And he's quite a good, honest character. But in the books, he's like the complete opposite. So I wonder who decided that Jenna was going to be the creep and Toby was going to be the nice one. Because that's a huge call to make, especially what Jenna did to Toby. So that's it, interesting, like who decided that, you know? But also another thing, Radley in the books wasn't really a big thing as compared to the show. Obviously in the show, I always say that every road kind of leads back to Radley. I think Radley is such an important part of the show, and I think without Radley, it's a lot of things are missing. Do you know what I mean? And everything was kind of born from Radley. But in the books, Radley wasn't really a thing. Courtney De Laurentiis, who is not in the books. Courtney De Laurentiis is Alison's twin. Keep that in mind, by the way. She's not in the books. She's not in the TV show, sorry. She goes to Radley for a bit. But, like, apart from that, nothing's really, like, Radley's not really a thing. Like, it is, but it's not, like, what, like, the importance it was for the show. And then in the books, Emily gets very depressed and she fakes her S word in order to catch A and Alison. So that's another interesting aspect of the show. Finally moving on to Alison De Laurentiis. Obviously, as you can see here, they look the same, basically. Blonde hair, blue eyes, that type of thing. A lot of the other characters, their physical appearance is actually a lot different than the show. But they kept the Alison thing, which I really like, actually. I really like Alison's appearance in terms of, like, it's so prominent. Like, in the show, like, whenever you would see, like, blonde hair, blue eyes, Alison. Do you know what I mean? When Alison went missing, she actually dyed her hair brown, kind of like the Vivian Dark Bloom situation to kind of hide away. But yeah, much like the TV show, Alison in the books is described as very crazy, the mean girl of Rosewood, very manipulative, basically the exact same as the TV show. So I'm glad they kept that. TV show Alison, pre-disappearance, and book Alison, same vibe, same person basically. So Alison and Courtney are twins. Courtney obviously is not in the book, the TV show. And Alison actually grew quite jealous of Courtney. They were very, very close at first, really close, but she actually grew jealous of her, and she convinced her parents that Courtney was crazy and that they had to send her to Radley. So Courtney got sent to Radley. However, the parents didn't know that the crazy one was actually Alison. Courtney spent 3 years in Radley. And when Courtney came back, Courtney pretended she was Alison and that Alison was Courtney. And then the parents sent Courtney, who was actually Alison, away at a pre-serve thing. And then when Alison came back, Alison, instead of the night that Alison went missing, it's still labeled as like the night Alison went missing. But the night that she went missing, obviously the TV show is a completely different situation. Cece hits Alison. Alison gets buried alive by Jessica. Who was it? Mona hit Bethany. You know the whole situation. But in the books, Alison hits Courtney and buries her alive with a character called Nick Maxwell. Nick Maxwell is Alison's ex-boyfriend, and she was dating him. So Nick would help Alison with this crime, I guess. In the books, Alison goes missing in 7th grade, whereas compared to the TV show, she goes missing in 2009. Obviously, she's not missing, she's alive, but in both situations, actually. It's interesting because in the books, Alison is actually A, whereas obviously in the TV show, it's Cece, Mona, Alex. I kind of love this. Like, I don't know, it's kind of obvious, that like Alison is A in the books and the TV show if it were to happen. But I think it's really good. I would have loved a main character to be A. In terms of like, Mona was the only A that I actually enjoyed, but to have Alison as A, I think would have been really, really cool. And like, I'm so down for that. She does end up going to jail for this as well, which I love it. I'm sorry, I love it. Like, everything goes back to Alison De Laurentiis. I've always said that in the show. And I think this is so cool in the books. Like, everything comes back to Alison, because Alison is Pretty Little Liars. Like, she is the show. Like, in the books, the Liars were actually friends with Courtney rather than Alison, because the TV show took a similar route with Jessica and Mary Drake in terms of like, one of the twins convinced the other one that like that one was the one that was crazy, and that one got sent to Radley because Mary Drake got sent to Radley instead of Jessica. So the books kind of followed that thing, but just with like different characters, which is really interesting. But also in the books, Alison has no connection to Ezra, which makes me think about, in the TV show, were they just trying to connect characters for the sake of it, or I don't know. Alison also attempted to kill the Liars so many times in the books, and obviously this doesn't happen in the TV show. I kind of love it. I don't know, I kind of love it. I'm going to read you a list, because 3 years after the whole Labor Day thing, Alison was revealed as A, and she actually killed a lot of people. So she killed Courtney De Laurentiis, Ian Thomas, Jenna, a character called Greg Messner, Robin Cook, and orchestrated the murder of Tabitha Clark, Kyla Kennedy, Graham Pratt, Gail Riggs, and the attempted murder of Iris Taylor, all with the help of her boyfriend Nick. I think that's kind of crazy. Like, I kind of love that. I think that's like a thing of Alison in the show. Like, her evilness kind of got wasted. Like, once she came back, like, it was like kind of like, oh, like, that's it, you know? But in the books, to have her actually like kill people, and like not just one person, she killed a lot of people. I think it's really, really, really cool. I love it. Like, I love it. Like, why not? Alison's kind of main targets were the friends of Courtney. She really disliked Courtney, her twin, who we mentioned before. However, so she kind of wanted to get revenge on them, and she wouldn't stop until like the Liars were like dead. But I believe Emily is the one that finds out about Alison being A, because Emily ends up faking her death, and she kind of gathers information about that, which is interesting, because obviously in the TV show the reveals are so different. Like, when they find out about Mona, it's kind of Spencer separately, and then with Cece they're all kind of together, and then with Alex Drake it was the whole Spencer thing. So yeah, I think that's really interesting. Okay, I think I'm going to do Aria next. Let me grab her photo. So Aria, I'm just looking at the photos. There's similarities. So obviously this is Aria in the show. We all know her. This is Aria in the books. This is what she looks like in the books. So obviously the hair color's different. I think the eye color's the same, but also I think the dress sense is quite different as well. In the show, her dress sense is very much focused on, and yeah, but with this, it's different. But kind of, there's another character who's way more different than the TV show, like way more than this. Book Aria, and then we have, I'm going to read you Aria's character description. So her description is an artistic, independent girl whose family moved back to Rosewood after her father took a 3-year sabbatical in Iceland. Prior to Alison's disappearance, Aria became aware that her father was having an affair with a student of his, Meredith. Having promised to keep it a secret, she is kicked out of the house after the first A reveals the affair to her mother. Her parents divorce, and Aria's father marries Meredith, whatever that means, and she becomes pregnant. Yep. Aria often feels out of place in Rosewood and tends to be attracted to older, more worldly men, which frequently causes conflicts for her. For her appearance, she's described as having trademark short shoulder-length blue-black hair and ice blue eyes, which are distinguishing features. She is said to be quite tall, as well as having pouty lips and a thin ballet dancer frame. Obviously, hair color is different. In the books, it's blue-black. In the show, she was red-black for a little while prior to Alison's disappearance. I forgot to say, Mona is actually one of the A's in the show. I forgot to say that. Alison's one of the A's, but also Mona is as well. Forgot to say that. Okay, so in the books, Aria and Ezra end up having a relationship. However, it's very short-lived because A tells Sean about the relationship and Sean obviously tells people about it. Like I said at the start, I think it's a very interesting route to take because in the show, all we kind of know is like Aria and Ezra. Do you know what I mean? And the only person that we knew Aria would end up with was Ezra throughout the entire show. So that was a big call to have Aria and Ezra kind of lead the show's relationships. So in the books, Aria and Sean actually date. However, in the TV show, this doesn't happen, and Hanna and Sean obviously date. Yeah, in the show, this doesn't happen. Why? I'm not too sure. I'm kind of thinking because they wanted the whole Ezra Aria thing. They didn't want to like distract people and like lead away from that relationship, so maybe because of that. Also in the books, Aria and Noel had quite a serious relationship. In the TV show, it's like hinted at, kind of. And I think Noel actually really likes Aria in the TV show, but there was never like a serious like relationship there compared to that of the books. So in the books, actually, Aria has quite a violent side to her. We see some violent flashes in the TV show, but nothing like this. Hear this, okay? She pushes a character called Claudia Huskiff. Is that her name? Husko. Off a ski lift. What? Obviously in the TV show, this doesn't happen. But yeah, I just think that's like really interesting because we see violent flashes in the TV show, like I said, but in the book, it's kind of shown a bit more. She has a little bit of a violent side to her, which I wish they would have explored in the TV show a bit more. But yeah, that's interesting. Aria also pushes a character called Thani off the roof of a building. Whereas in the TV show, this, I guess, equivalates to the whole Shauna thing happening. And also in the books, Aria has a half-sister called Lola. Obviously, in the show, no, they just have Mike in there. That's kind of it differences-wise for Aria's character, really. I'm not going to give like a full timeline of her character, but that's just kind of like the main differences. Yeah, I think it's interesting the route that they take. There's a lot of things that they just didn't include in the TV show, but they included in the books. I kind of like seeing her violent side. I don't know, because I'm such a massive like diehard like Aria is A, and so I think to see the violent side in the books was very interesting to me just because I like that theory. But also the whole Ezra thing is really interesting to see a lot, because the fact they didn't include that in the books speaks volumes a lot to me, I think, compared to obviously the TV show. Okay, I think next we're going to do Spencer. Spencer is a lot more different. So obviously this is the Spencer that we are given in the show. We know her very well. Troyan, love you, babes. And this is Spencer in the books. Very, very different. Notably, looks very similar to Alison. Interesting. I'm going to read you her personality as described from the book. Spencer is described as having long blonde hair, as well as small upturned nose, pointed chin, blue eyes, and bow-shaped lips, similar to her half-sisters, who are Alison and Courtney. She has a cute, preppy style, quite tall and slim from being active in sports like tennis, field hockey, running, and things like dance. She tends to wear natural makeup. She has wavy hair, and she normally wears her hair down. So personality-wise, she is an extremely competitive girl who strives for perfection in everything she does, a high-strung overachiever, and Spencer is willing to do whatever it takes to win, often to the detriment of herself and others. And she is quick to jump to conclusions and suffers from IED. Quite similar to the TV show, competitive and kind of like, you know, she'll do anything to kind of be the best. So personality-wise, very much the same. I think it's really interesting, okay, that she is probably the one that looks like Alison the most. Obviously, she's Alison's half-sister in the books compared to the show, which they are cousins, I believe. But I find that really interesting, and how they didn't go down that route. Obviously, the casting in the show is always going to be different because actors don't always look, you know, to the character in the books and stuff like that. And Troyanna is such a good actress, they were probably like, girl, we cannot say no. But I find it interesting because in the books, she's like the total opposite to Alison in terms of look, which is really interesting. And obviously in the show, Hanna is the one that kind of looks more like Alison the most. And there's even a scene with Wilden where Wilden's like, you kind of look like Alison, are you jealous? So I don't know, because they were obviously aware of it if they said that about Hanna. So I don't know, I think that's really interesting. In the books, Spencer ends up dating Andrew. Obviously in the TV show, Andrew, I think, is very much in love with Spencer, but I don't think Spencer really shows that back. So nothing really comes to that relationship. But in the books, they do actually date. As well as this, in the books, Spencer and Toby don't really talk or interact that much, really. Which is obviously a huge difference to the show, because in the show, they obviously date for the majority of the show. So obviously they took a different route with Toby, and that is why. But it's kind of like the whole Ezra and Aria thing. Like, the fact that the show took such a jump at like, okay, Spencer and Toby are going to be like the it couple, I think is really interesting compared to obviously in the book, where Toby doesn't really exist that much. And do you know what I mean? As well as this, in the books, Ren and Spencer actually date. In the TV show, they kind of kiss here and there, sleep together here and there, but there's never really like a relationship that kind of comes from it, you know? Probably one of the biggest things in the books, Spencer is not a twin. She doesn't have it. Alex Drake does not exist. Mary Drake does not exist. There is no twin thing. I think the writers ultimately wanted to do the twin thing in the show, but they obviously assumed that Alison was not the right person to have the twin thing. And maybe it was because of the books. Maybe they didn't want to make it obvious and copy the books, you know, down to the last dot on the page. So they obviously kept the twin thing quite alive and did it with Spencer instead. Which personally I didn't like. But that's just because the reveal was very, do you know what I mean? In the books, Spencer's mum gets engaged to a man called Nicholas Pennythistle. Spencer and the family go to like a formal meal to kind of introduce themselves and stuff. And she takes a real liking to his son, Zach. And he also has a daughter called Amelia, and she doesn't really get on with her. But she ends up kissing Zach, which is her soon-to-be stepbrother. So we got a little bit of incest in there. I'm kind of glad the show did it with Cece and Jason, but I'm kind of glad they didn't take this route, actually. But it's also interesting to see Veronica, the difference with Veronica. Veronica's character in the show has this whole battle with kind of coming to terms with her and Peter's relationship coming to kind of an end, and here and there she tries to explore other avenues, but it's like not really, and they end up getting a divorce and things like that. So in the show in the books it's interesting that she in fact does go for someone else compared to Peter Hastings, who kind of just stays there the whole time. There's 2 other characters in the books that Spencer dates who doesn't exist in the books. Their names are Alex and Rafia as well. One similarity in the books and the TV show is that Spencer deals with a drug issue. So in the books, Spencer's parents are unaware of a drug situation going on with Spencer. However, in the TV show, they're obviously a lot more aware of it because it kind of spirals out of control and Spencer goes to Radley and all of that. So, like I said, in the books, Spencer is the half-sister of Courtney De Laurentiis and Alison De Laurentiis, because Alison actually discovers that Peter Hastings had an affair with Jessica De Laurentiis, and Jessica then obviously had Spencer along with Alison and Courtney. In the books, Spencer and Ren actually become an official couple, and that's kind of through towards the ending. Obviously in the show it's not like this, and Spencer, she doesn't end up with Toby, but it's hinted that like they got back together, they're giving things another try type of thing. I think I would have hated it if Ren and Spencer were together in the show, because I don't like the underage relationship thing. And I think it would have just been another Aria Ezra situation, and I think it would have been even more uncomfortable than what the Aria and Ezra thing is in itself. It would have been even more like, oh, so we have 2 underage relationships there. In the books as well, it's interesting. Spencer is kind of on the cover of most of them, and she's kind of the main protagonist of the books, whereas in the TV show she becomes the main protagonist, but her story kind of takes over after the whole CC reveal. It's like season 7 onwards really, and all the liars are kind of involved, and there's not really a main one apart from like Alison, and they all have their own stories. But in the books they obviously have their own stories, but Spencer's kind of the main like protagonist type of thing. You know how like in the show like Aria is the one that does the shush? That's kind of like Spencer in the books. Do you know what I mean? That's it for Spencer. So now, who should we do next? I think we should do Emily. Let's do Emily. Okay, so Emily is probably the one who looks the most different, I think, book compared to TV show. So obviously, this is Emily that we are shown in the TV show. Shay Mitchell, stunning, beautiful. And this is her in the books, right? Totally different situation, and they take a whole different route in regards of her race, which we will look at because I find that really interesting. So I'm going to pop these up on the wall. So once again, I'm going to read Emily's appearance and personality for you. So in the books, Emily has a cute freckled face and hazel green eyes. Her strawberry blonde hair is often tinted green from chlorine. Oh my god, I have an itchy eye. And she has broad shoulders and is skinny and has muscular legs and thighs. Personality: Emily is the sweet girl in the group. She's sympathetic and compassionate to others. She loves very passionately, and sometimes her love for people can cloud her judgment. Emily is very naive at times and lets her love for Ali get in the way of her logic thinking. She's also the most forgiving in the 4 girls. In the books, Emily is bisexual compared to the TV show, which she is a lesbian. Personality-wise, she's very much the same. Whilst reading that, I think, yeah, she's very compassionate in the books and the TV show. And I think in both, really, it's true that her love for Ali kind of gets in the way a lot of time in terms of like her rational thinking. I think, yeah, personality wise, very, very similar. Story wise, there's a whole difference. So in the books, Emily is Caucasian, whereas in the TV show, she comes from Filipino and Korean descent. And there's hints through the books that her parents are a little bit on the racist side. They're very homophobic. And similar to the TV show, once they find out about Emily's sexuality, they do send her away. I find that really interesting how they didn't take on the story about the race stuff, because that's kind of prominent in, I say, the first and second book, really, from Pam. Obviously the TV show is a completely different thing because they are people of color in a TV show, so it's not really a thing that they speak about too much. But in the books, it was interesting in terms of like seeing the difference, and seeing how Emily kind of comes to terms with her parents being like the way that they are. In the books, they find out about Emily's sexuality and they send her away to Iowa. Sounds weird to me. Whereas in the TV show, obviously they send Maya away. Maya's the one who gets sent to like a rehab place, I guess, for her sexuality. Whereas in the books, it is Emily. Paige doesn't exist in the books. She only exists in the TV show, which is another interesting thing to me, because Paige isn't like the long-term relationship, but they're together for a very long time in the books. But she's also a character that's very unique in terms of like they do some things, like she does things, they wrote about her, and then kind of her attitude sometimes, and the way that her and Emily even met the first time anyway. And she's a very debatable character. Some people love her, some people hate her, some people are quite neutral about her. So they made quite a good character there in terms of bringing out discussion from the audience. So I think that's kind of a good one that's included in the TV show. My opinion on Paige, I used to hate her quite a lot, but during my rewatch, I'm quite neutral about her now. I don't love her, but I don't hate her. So in the books, Emily gets pregnant with a child, obviously, but the father is called Isaac. Obviously in the TV show, this doesn't happen, but she ends up giving the baby up for adoption. As well as this, in the books sends Emily to like an Amish community to search for Alison's killer. Obviously in the TV show this doesn't happen. In the books, Emily's first kiss is with Courtney, and this is because Courtney was pretending to be Alison, so Emily thought she was Alison, and that's why she gets so hung up on the whole Alison relationship thing for a lot of the show, and kind of where her questions came about her sexuality. And like I said earlier, in the books, Emily is the one to find out about Alison being alive and being Emily ends up faking her death by S-word, so that in order she can go and find this which I think is is an interesting way to go, especially because she's in love with Alison. I think having kind of lovers, I guess, to find each other, but Alison find her as like the villain is really interesting, but also just an interesting way to go for like the reveal type of thing. But Alison actually gets revealed as A quite early on, I think. I don't think they really drag it out until the end. So in the books, she had relationships with Ben, Maya, Toby, Isaac, Trista. She kissed Alison and Courtney, Kelsey Pierce and Jordan Richards. Obviously, a lot of these characters don't exist in the show. Also, there's a similar situation with the way they found out about Emily and Maya. The whole photo booth situation does happen, but A actually hands out copies of the photos during like a swim competition, I believe. So yeah, that was a very harsh way for Emily's sexuality to be put out there, and bless her, she kind of goes through it in the books and the TV show, bless her, with her sexuality and coming to terms with everything. But her parents are a lot harsher in the books than the TV show. In the TV show, obviously Pam at first is very homophobic and doesn't like Emily being gay, but she kind of warms to it quite quickly, and Pam's character development is very good in the TV show. But in the books it's a lot more harsher, and they literally like send her away. So yeah, there's a lot more to that than the TV show. But yeah, that's kind of it for Emily's character. So now we're going to move on to Hanna. Hanna's character, obviously TV show, we know her very well. Book Hanna, bit different. There she is in all her beauty. Okay, there we are. We have all the characters up there. So, talking of Hanna, I'm going to read her physical appearance and description of her character for you. So, in the books, Hanna has dyed dark auburn hair and brown eyes compared to the TV show in which she has blonde hair and blue eyes. She's a pretty, popular girl who struggles with bulimia and anorexia due to insecurities about her appearance. She's flighty and occasionally airheaded, and Hanna often acts purely on impulse. In Alison's absence, she became best friends with Mona, not knowing that Mona was A. Hanna's parents divorced when she was younger after her father had an affair. Hanna dislikes her father's new wife Isabel and her daughter Kate, with whom she forms a rivalry. For a short time, Hanna is sent to a mental institution, her father believing her eating disorders are resurfacing. There's some similarities there and some differences. Similarities with the whole Kate Isabel situation, and her parents divorcing kind of because of her dad. It's interesting that she in the books chose to dye her hair after Alison went missing. I think there's some links there. In the TV show, often, like when Alison came back, Hanna cut her hair and had dyed pieces in her hair, and Wilden accuses her early on in the season of kind of looking exactly like Alison. So I think they kind of carried over the fact that in the books she changed her appearance. I think they carried that over to the TV show a bit and would fight that kind of looking like Alison appearance type of thing, if you know what I mean. So in the books, Hanna and Alison actually met Kate together prior to the disappearance, but obviously in the books it was just Hanna that met Kate because it was after the whole disappearance thing. Now the biggest thing, one of the biggest things, so in the books Hanna and Mike actually get married, whereas in the TV show they hooked up one time. But in the actual books, they get married. I think that's really interesting. I felt their hookup was a bit weird. So it's interesting in the books that there's actually way more to that, and it's actually like a full-blown relationship. I don't know the exact age differences. So it could actually be a very weird relationship. But I'm not too sure on the specific age differences there, but that is a question up for debate. Obviously in the TV show they had Hanna and Caleb, which I much prefer. I love them together. I think they're so cute together. I think they're kind of made for each other, and they help each other a lot with their own situations and circumstances. Yeah, that's like the biggest difference really. Another thing, Hannah's mum in the books actually leaves Hanna in because she has a job opportunity, whereas in the books Ashley and Hanna are very close. I really like the bonds that Ashley and Hanna have in the TV show. I think it's really nice. And I love it. Like, I love Ashley. I think she's the best parent on the show, to be honest. So I'm glad that in the TV show, Hanna had her mum there and kind of teaching her life lessons, but also teaching like it's okay to make mistakes and things like that. Whereas in the books, they obviously don't have that relationship. Hannah's obsession with popularity continues kind of throughout the entire book series. Whereas in the TV show, after Mona is revealed as A, Hanna kind of gives up on the whole popularity thing because that was the thing that her and Mona did, and she didn't want to carry that on. In the books, when A runs her over, like what happens in the TV show, Hanna actually deals with really bad amnesia, so she doesn't remember who A is and who actually hit her. Whereas in the TV show, Hanna just broke her leg after the whole incident. Also, Wilden doesn't harass Hanna in the books. Yay, we all cheered. Wilden in the TV show is a menace. He harasses Hanna quite a lot, tries to get a lot of information out of her. Thank God this doesn't happen in the book. I cannot deal with him in the TV show and in the book. Are you kidding me? In the books, Hanna actually has a friendship group consisting of Riley, Naomi, and Kate. which is interesting compared to obviously the show where it's the liars, Spencer, Aria, Emily, etc. So that's really interesting. Like I said, in the books, they don't really become close until like later on compared to the TV show. In the books, Hanna and Lucas have a serious relationship, whereas obviously in the show, they're more kind of just best friends. I think Lucas has feelings for her, but it doesn't get reciprocated. Obviously, like I said before, Caleb doesn't exist in the book, so they never end up dating. And in the books, Mona only pretends to be Hannah's friend, whereas in the actual show, they are like actually close and like best friends. I actually really like their friendship in the show. I know what Mona did, guys. I'm very much aware, but I quite love the friendship. I don't know. I like it. In the show, Hanna is kidnapped by Uber A. This doesn't happen in the books. When Emily fakes her death, at Emily's funeral, Spencer and Hanna get into a really big fight, and it kind of leads the liars into accusing each other of being blamed for Emily's death. Later on, Mike decides to propose to Hanna, and they start planning the funeral quite quick because Alison's setting them up and they could go to prison. So Mike's like, God, like I could lose Hanna here. Hannah's dad shows up to the wedding. It's very similar in terms of Hanna doesn't have a good relationship with her dad in the books or out of the books in the TV show. But Hanna decides to be the bigger person and forgives her dad. They get married and all of the liars end up making up after Alison is revealed as A. And then Hanna actually stars in a film called Burn It Down. And all the liars attend the premiere, and that's it. I think there's some really interesting differences in terms of the TV show and the books. I think some of them are good things that didn't happen in the show, but I think some of them are like, I kind of wish that was in the show. Do you know what I mean? I would love to hear your opinions down below. Yeah, make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye, guys.